Lanka. I think it is 12:59 in US, right?
I just opened up. We're live.
Okay, great.
Should I start?
Yeah, let's start. Yes.
Okay. Welcome to the Sea Turtle E-Conference. Thank you very much for joining us here today. My name is Lorraine Leo. I'm a teacher of technology, former teacher in outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And joining us here from Sri Lanka is Manjula Gayan.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for joining with us today. And my name is Manjula Gayan, and I'm a teacher of information technology and at the Pahan Institute of Language and Technology in Sri Lanka. So, before we begin, I want to orient you to the Jitsi room first. So, the chat box is on the lower left, and please keep your microphone on mute and keep your headphone on. And if you have technical difficulties, please log out and then log back in. And if that doesn't solve the problem, so please listen to the live stream, which refers to your sheet that was emailed to you for your URLs in your email. Yeah.
Thank you, Manjula, and thank you for designing the beautiful invitation that everyone received. It's really amazing. We have the pleasure. We have the pleasure of introducing you to Brad Nahill, who's the co-founder and president of Sea Turtles in Oregon, USA. He is a wildlife conservationist, a fundraiser, and a social entrepreneur focusing on sea turtles in Latin America. I first connected with Brad in 2014 when my students were doing a project on the ocean, and I was in search of an expert on sea turtles. Brad is not only an expert on sea turtles, he's also a passionate teacher. My students loved learning from him. To celebrate World Oceans Day, I thought it would be wonderful to invite Brad to talk with you, the teachers and students from all over the world. And what we'd like to do is talk about these wonderful and amazing reptiles that he's so familiar with. If you have questions for Brad, please put them in the chat. And at the end, he'll be able to answer the questions that are in the chat.
Yes, please join us in welcoming Brad Nahill in Sea Turtle organization.
Thank you very much. Oh, go ahead. Are you still good? Sorry, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much, Manjula and Lorraine. It's a real pleasure to be speaking to you guys all today. As Lorraine mentioned, today is World Oceans Day, and we also consider it sort of the unofficial start of a new initiative. I'll talk a little bit about it later, but we're calling it Sea Turtle Week because the 16th of June is World Sea Turtle Day, and there's 7 days starting tomorrow. There's 7 days up until World Sea Turtle Day. There's 7 species of sea turtles, so each day we focus on a different species and a different threat. And so we're really excited to be launching this week, chatting with you guys here, these great teachers from around the world, and as well as the folks on YouTube. So this is very exciting. So all right, Lorraine, should I jump into the presentation?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to be sharing my screen here. It's not showing the PowerPoint. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Okay. So, as Lorraine said, my name's Brad. I run a sea turtle organization called Sea Turtles, spelled S-E-E. And what we do is we help people go and see sea turtles in person, which can help support both their conservation and local communities. So today I'm going to be talking to you about some of my experiences working with sea turtles, as well as some information about these amazing animals. So when I first started working with sea turtles, which was over 20 years ago now, my first experience was in a beach called Costa Rica, or a place called Costa Rica on a turtle nesting beach. And so I got there and we got out to the beach and this is what it looked like. There were no stars, there was no moon. We couldn't see anything at all. And it was a little bit overwhelming, that first experience. But there was a group of us, we started walking down the beach and we see a little flash of red up ahead on the beach. And that's someone with a red flashlight signaling us that they've got a turtle and that they need our help. So we start walking quickly down the beach.
Give me a moment, Brett. Sorry for the interruption. So can you see the screen sharing, Lauren?
Sorry?
Can you see the screen is sharing?
Oh, am I still sharing the screen?
Yeah. Can I see the sharing screen on the Jitsi?
Can you see the presentation?
Oh, no, I can't.
So, Brady, you are sharing your screen, right?
Yeah, I am.
Wait.
I can stop it and start it again.
That's good.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, great. Now we can see the screen. Thank you.
Is that working now?
Yeah, it's working now. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. All right. So, okay, sure. So yeah, this is what we saw when we got down the beach. So this is the first real slide anyway, so we didn't miss anything. So yeah, this is a giant leatherback sea turtle. And I had not done a whole lot of preparation in advance of going to this beach, and I did not know a lot about the turtles when I got there. I certainly didn't know that I would be seeing this 6 foot long, probably 700 or 800 pound monster. So for international folks, that's 300, 350 kilos. Monster dragging itself out of the water and pulling itself up onto the beach to lay its eggs. And from that moment on, I fell in love with these animals, and I've been working with them ever since. And I love being out on the beach and in the water with these animals, but I also love sharing information with folks like you. So I'm really glad to be able to be here today. So I call the presentation Mysteries of the Seas because there's a lot that we know about sea turtles, but there's a lot that we also don't know. There's only so much that you can learn about an animal when it's only on land for a short period of time. We don't all have little submarines that we can follow the turtles around once they get out to the water. So, we use other techniques to try to learn, and the technology is advancing, but even though people have been studying sea turtles for 60 plus years, there's still a lot that we don't know. So I'll talk a little bit about what we do and what we don't know. And there are 7 species of sea turtles. You can see them all here. If you count real fast, you'll see that there's 8 turtles up on the slide, but the 2 on the far right are both green turtles. So the bottom one is kind of the typical green turtle that you'll find in most places around the world. And in the top right corner is what we call the black turtle, which is a subspecies of the green turtle that can be found in the Pacific Ocean. The big one here in the middle, that's the leatherback that I was talking about and sharing and describing in the first slide. They are by far the largest of sea turtles and one of the biggest reptiles on Earth. The biggest one that's ever been recorded was roughly 12 feet long and 2,000 pounds. So that's 800 kilos and 3.5 meters. So really quite astoundingly large. We don't get them quite that big anymore. That was quite a while ago that one was registered, but they are just enormous animals. On the bottom is the loggerhead turtle, the one eating the crab there. The loggerheads and the greens are the next biggest turtles. They're about maybe half the size of a full-grown leatherback. In the bottom left corner with the pretty shell, that's the hawksbill, and I'll talk a little bit more later about how that shell has actually caused them to be endangered. The tiny one here next to the leatherback is the flatback, and that is found out around Australia, so that's very limited to a certain part of the world. In the corner, and the olive ridley here on the top. And the Kemp's ridley is probably the most endangered, the fewest number of these turtles. They can be found in the Gulf of Mexico and the east coast of the United States. And then the olive really can be found all around the world, and they're probably the most numerous of all sea turtles. So just to give you a quick idea of where can you find sea turtles, well, almost everywhere. So the blue is their range of where they will swim. Leatherback turtles primarily can go up to and down to very, very cold waters. They're big shells and dark shells that they can collect sun and keep themselves with the sun on the surface, allows them to go to places like Alaska and northern Canada. But most sea turtles stay around the tropics and the subtropics. So, this range, and you see most of the nesting is in, the tropics and subtropics here. So not all, these dots are not all of the nesting places. This is just one species. This is just the green turtle. But you can see they can be found in hundreds of countries, over 100 countries around the world, both on land nesting and in the waters. So what's the life cycle of a sea turtle? So first thing that they'll do is they'll meet off of the nesting beaches, and they'll mate. The females will mate with several males, and then each nest can have eggs with different females who will head onshore. She'll pull herself up onto the beach, cross over the high tide line, because if the tide comes up and covers the nest, it would kill the nest. So they have to go above the furthest place where the water comes ashore. They then dig themselves what we call a body pit. That's what this turtle is doing. They dig themselves down into the sand a little bit. Then with their back flippers, scooping one at a time, they scoop out the sand until they get as deep as their flipper can go. From there, they will lay their eggs, and it depends on the species, but they can lay anywhere from, maybe 70 eggs in a nest to over 200. So the leatherbacks have fewer ones; they have bigger eggs, and then the like turtles like the hawksbills can have lots of 200. I've heard of eggs nests with 250 eggs.
Wow.
After that, they will camouflage the nest, and it also looks like this, where they will take their flippers and toss sand in a big area. We believe that's a characteristic, a trait that they learn to hide the nests from predators. So they'll do that for a little while, then they turn around, head back to the water, and depending upon the species, again, they will come back anywhere from 2 to up to 8 or as many as 10 times in one season. So the leatherbacks, since they lay fewer eggs, will average 5 or 6 nests per season. So they'll nest every 10 days or so, and then other ones that lay more eggs in a nest will lay 2 to 3 times, and then they'll head off into the waters. Most of them will go migrate, some of them really long distances. So here in the United States, or in the Americas at least, the leatherbacks that lay their eggs in the Caribbean and along the Caribbean coast of Central America will migrate all the way up to Canada, sometimes then all the way over to Africa, and then back to their nesting beaches. And it can be, thousands of miles. There are also leatherbacks that will lay their eggs in Indonesia and Malaysia and come all the way to the United States off of California and then up to Alaska. But not all the turtles have long migrations. The hawksbills will stay pretty close to where they nest. But most of them have pretty good migrations. And what they're doing is they're going and looking for their food. So they migrate to their feeding areas and then back. So those eggs in that nest, they'll take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to hatch. Generally, a bunch of hatchlings will emerge all together. At the beginning, they make this little sound. It's the only sound that I know of that sea turtles make. It's called pipping. It's a high-pitched frequency that's a signal to the other hatchlings that, hey, we're ready to go. And they've got this little egg tooth. You can kind of see it on the front of this one here, called a caruncle. And that will break through the egg, and then they will all come up to most of them will come up to the surface together and then down out into the water. They will never see or have any interaction with the female who laid the eggs. They have everything that they need to know in their tiny little brains when they're born. And from where they go from there is actually one of the mysteries. We call it the lost years. In some places, we have an idea of where they go to grow and feed and then finally return, which can take anywhere from maybe as few as 15 years, but more like 20 to as much as 30 years later when they're fully grown to start nesting again. So that's one of the big areas of research in sea turtles is those lost years, where they go once the hatchlings are born and leave the beach. So moving on to why are sea turtles important? They're important for a lot of reasons. When you talk about any kind of animal, their importance relates to how they interact with their habitats, right? So what they eat, what eats them, things like that. And so that's the case with these sea turtles. Our best guess, as far as I know, there isn't a lot of science, really behind this, but our best guess is that maybe 1 out of 1,000 of these hatchlings survive until adulthood. And so what happens? Well, in some places, domestic animals will eat them. Now, there's a lot of places where people aren't able to get their dogs and cats, neutered. They might not have the money. In places where there are nesting beaches, the dogs and cats will dig up nests and eat hatchlings or eggs in some cases. But it's primarily wild predators, so birds and fish. Crabs will grab them as they make their way from the beach down to the water and pull them down into their holes. The birds will get them as they swim out to sea. There are types of flies that will lay their larvae on top of the sand where the nest is, and then the larvae will make their way down to the nest and eat the eggs before they can develop. And that's, when you're working with sea turtles, finding a nest like that is one of the least favorite parts of the job. It's really quite awful. But, it is a part of nature, but you would never think that a fly could be a predator for a sea turtle, but they are. There are also mammals like raccoons, and this black and white one here at the top is called a coati. It's a Central American rainforest mammal, kind of similar to a raccoon. And in some places, people eat turtle eggs, and it's been a tradition for that for a long time. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. So, you can see how many predators they have. And if only 1 out of 1,000 of them are making it to adulthood, how are they still around, right? Well, like I said just now, they will lay, 2 to 6 or 7 or more times in a season every couple of years, and they can do that for 30 or 40 years. So if you do all that math, which I won't make you do, but if you add all that up, each sea turtle in their lifetime can lay 4,000 or 5,000 eggs. So the hope is at least 4 or 5 of those survive and become adults and keep the species going. And that's how it has been for more than 100 million years. We have sea turtle fossils over 120 million years old, so they've outsurvived the dinosaurs. So, when I talk to kids, I get a lot of kids saying, oh, that's so sad. And yeah, it is sad that these hatchlings, most of them don't survive, but it is nature. And, you also got to think from, the perspective of the other animals living there. There's quite a few animals that depend on hatchlings or eggs for, a good portion of their food too, for a good portion of the year. So that's something that makes sea turtles very important. Actually, going back to this, they're also important for beach habitats, because those eggs, they bring them out of the water, they lay them in the nest, and not all the eggs will survive, or the eggs will hatch, and so these will break down and become nutrients for beach vegetation, which beaches have very little nutrients for that. And there are actually species of plants that will grow specifically on top of old nests that reach their roots down and use those decomposing eggs as fertilizer or nutrients, which is pretty interesting. Another reason that sea turtles are important is for what they eat. And so if you have some familiarity with sea turtles, you probably know that they like jellyfish. The leatherback turtle specifically loves jellyfish. That's all that they eat. And so to be able to survive off a jellyfish, now this picture might not look like a jellyfish to you. They come in all shapes and sizes. There are jellyfish that are, hundreds of pounds or, 100 kilos or more. Just absolutely gigantic ones. And they have very little nutrition as well. They're mostly made out of water. And so how does a giant sea turtle like this that's swimming thousands of miles survive from eating exclusively something that's mostly made out of water? Well, it's all about the volume. These turtles can eat up to 80% of their body weight per day in jellyfish, which is an extraordinary number. So if you're thinking about an 800-pound turtle, you're talking about 600 pounds or more of jellyfish every single day that they're feeding. And so that's why I mentioned that they will go up to the colder waters, because that's where you can find these gigantic jellyfish. So not all sea turtles exclusively eat jellyfish. Different species eat different things. They'll all eat them opportunistically, but it's the leatherback that really loves them. So if you love to swim in the ocean, you have a real incentive to keep these leatherbacks around and the other turtles to help keep jellyfish populations in control, because they don't have a lot of natural predators, and they don't feel the sting of the jellyfish when they eat them. They're impervious to it. They're immune to the jellyfish sting. The green sea turtle is actually primarily, when it's an adult, an herbivore, and they will eat seagrass. And there have been studies that have shown that seagrass beds that are grazed by sea turtles are actually healthier than ones that are not. And an interesting thing about this species is, because they eat almost exclusively seagrass, it turns their fat green, and these are the most popular turtles to eat. And so when they were being eaten on a big scale, they still are, but not nearly as much as they were previously, and a couple hundred years ago, when they would be put in a pot to make turtle soup, it would turn the soup green. And so that's where they came up with the name. It has nothing to do with the color of their shell. Once they're fully grown, a full-sized sea turtle really has very few predators. That shell that they grow, which is made out of keratin, so the same thing that's in your fingernails and your hair, just really thick and hardened. It weighs them down, so it's hard for them to outswim anything in the ocean, but it is really good protection from most predators. There are a few predators, though, wild predators, that sea turtles have to look out for as they're swimming around the ocean. And this is a drawing, but it's a great dramatization of their biggest natural predator is the sharks. So great whites, tiger sharks, the bigger sharks are able to bite through that shell. But there are other predators, including one that people rarely ever think of, jaguars. Jaguars have learned, and this is actually something that's been increasing and only started being documented in the last couple of decades, where in places like in Central America, where the rainforest goes right down to the beach, jaguars have learned that there's this slow-moving, basically defenseless animal out on the beach. And so they'll go out and eat the turtles. They'll eat mostly their shoulders and kind of around their neck, because they can't get into the shell. I have a couple of friends who patrol on beaches where the jaguars will come, and they've never been threatened by one, but I can't imagine being out on a beach and looking for a turtle and seeing those pair of eyes looking back at you. Other predators for fully grown sea turtles, occasionally an orca. I've seen photos of a giant crocodile trying to eat a sea turtle. And I recently saw some documentation. I don't think I have I don't have the photo, but of a Komodo dragon eating a sea turtle in Indonesia, which is a pretty amazing thing. The dragon had eaten the head of the turtle and had its head completely inside the shell. So it was basically wearing the shell on its head. Really, if you're interested, you can. A few months ago. So I mentioned why sea turtles are important for the beach. They're also really important for many coastal communities around the world. At least before the pandemic, turtle watching is a very popular activity. and helps provide income for a lot of places around the world. There are programs where you can go out and see them on nesting beaches. This one is from Mexico, where you can go and stay in a tent camp, and they catch the turtles in the water, and then they measure them. Like you can see this guy here measuring and tagging them, collecting the data, making sure they're healthy, and then putting them back out into the water. And so this is a source of income for quite a number of communities around the world. They're also really important spiritually for a number of native communities around the world. There are ones that that believe that, you know, the sea turtles are their ancestors coming back to life. In other places, you know, there are communities that believe that the earth was created on the back of a turtle. And so they have this long relationship going back thousands of years with these animals, and so are very important for them culturally. And then finally, something that we also rarely talk about is the emotional and cognitive benefits of seeing wildlife, of being in the water. It's what my colleague and co-founder of my organization. And so you're out in the water and floating along and see a sea turtle or other animals, or just being in the water in general or around it, looking at it, thinking about it. It puts your brain into a meditative state, into a creative state, and is very beneficial for both your brain and your body. It generates hormones like oxytocin, things like that. And so, you know, that side of you know, experiencing wildlife and experiencing the water is, I think, underappreciated. So moving along to, moving along to why are sea turtles endangered? They're endangered for a lot of reasons, so I'll talk about them now. And I'll also talk about what endangered means, because I know conservationists, we use these words a lot, but we don't always give people a definition so we know exactly what we're talking about. So this is the status of all the 7 species of sea turtles in the world. This is done by an organization called the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN. And so they're the ones that determine whether different plants and animals and things are endangered. And so to qualify to be considered critically endangered means at least an 80% drop in the population over 3 generations, so birth to reproduction. And so, like I said, for a sea turtle, that can be 20, 25 years. So if you think about, you know, a group of 100 turtles, from, you know, 50 or 60 years ago, if there's 100 of them, and now there's 20 turtles to be considered endangered, have to have dropped at least 60%. So 40 or fewer turtles out of those original 100. And then to be considered vulnerable, it has to be at least a 40% drop. So out of 160 or fewer. So you can see 3 of the species are considered vulnerable, 1 endangered, and 2 critically endangered. Now it's hard to tell, and I'll talk a little bit about it more, but there's actually some hidden good news in this. So I'm going to talk about some of that good news later on. The flatback is considered vulnerable in Australia where it lives, but worldwide it's still listed as data deficient, which means, you know, we don't have enough information to determine, you know, its status, but it's probably also some form of being endangered. So why is that happening? Well, one of the biggest reasons is they get caught in fishing gear, what is sometimes known as bycatch. And so, you know, they may not be targeted by the fishermen. They may not want to catch turtles, but if you put a long line, which is what this is, that can be 60 miles long and have bait on the hooks, and the turtles can bite onto that and get caught on the hooks and held underwater and can drown. And there was some research done a few years ago that estimated about 1.5 million turtles caught and dying in the world's fisheries over a 20-year period. So that can be shrimp nets, it can be long lines, it can be what we call bomb fishing, which is a homemade explosive that's thrown into the water. A lot of places do that. So that's one of the biggest threats. Another one of the biggest threats is people eating. Now, this is from a beach in Costa Rica where it's something called an arrabada happens here. So this is the olive ridley turtle. And in 10 or 12 places around the world, they will nest in these huge groups. And this one in Costa Rica, this place called Ostional, can have over 100,000 turtles nesting over 3, 4, 5 days. And so what they've figured out is that the eggs that are laid initially don't generally survive. And so what they do is they let the community collect those initial eggs and sell them legally around the country, which is a bit controversial and can cause other issues, but I don't have really time to get into that today. But in reality, this is happening a lot less than it used to around the world. I know when I first started working with sea turtles, 20 years ago, I didn't really know much about, the conditions of the places where these turtles were laying, that I would get mad sometimes and say, oh, why are you eating the turtles? Why are you eating the eggs? But as I lived in some of these communities and worked in places like Costa Rica, I learned that, number one, in a lot of these places, people's great-grandparents and grandparents and parents ate the turtles and fed them turtles, and they've always been there. And they don't, maybe they don't know that they're dropping. Maybe they don't know the worldwide situation for them. Maybe they don't have alternatives. Maybe there's, not much else to be able to eat or ways to earn money in the community. So, what we as conservationists try to do is, what my organization and others try to do is figure out ways to help these communities develop and, earn an income and have enough food for their families, without eating the turtles or their eggs and in a non-judgmental way. And so what I was talking about, the turtle watching is a great way to do that, when the tourism industry around the world is not at an absolute standstill. But so tourism can be good for sea turtles and good for these local communities. You may have heard that plastic is a big problem for sea turtles, and it really is. This is a great photo by a wonderful photographer named Ben Hicks. What we know is that sea turtles, when there's a plastic bag floating through the ocean like this, it really can't tell the difference between that and a jellyfish, and they will eat them on purpose. But the problem with plastic goes beyond just accidentally eating them. And if you eat too many, it can block your throat, can fill up your stomach, and obviously they can't survive on plastic. But the plastic issue is so much bigger than just them eating it. They swim through it as they swim through the different gyres, big ocean currents. They can get caught in plastic, like ghost fishing nets that break and head off to sea and keep fishing even though there's no fishermen there. They may have to crawl through it as adults or as hatchlings on the beaches, and even tiny little pieces of microplastic, if they end up in the sand, which they are in a lot of places, that can actually impact the hatchlings themselves and the eggs. So our belief is that every single sea turtle on Earth interacts with plastic in our lifetimes, and this is just a huge and growing problem. Fossil fuel production and global warming are both also big problems for sea turtles. I know we have a pretty international audience here, but some of you may remember the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico a few years ago. That spill is still affecting wildlife in the Gulf of Mexico. And now, we know that the dispersant that they put on the oil to make it go away for the TV cameras actually was as toxic or more than the oil itself. And so we really believe that we need to transition away from fossil fuels, both drilling for it in the oceans and burning it in our atmosphere. Is a big problem for sea turtles. So how does global warming affect sea turtles? Well, number one is the sex of a sea turtle is not determined when the egg is laid. It is determined by the temperature of the nest and where that egg is within the nest. And so there is a pivotal temperature that above that, the hatchlings will be female, and below that, they will be male. And there was some research done not too long ago in Australia where they estimated that 99% of the hatchlings being born on the beach that they were working on were female. And so obviously we want a good mix of male and female. And so that's a big problem, and one that'll be very difficult to change unless you can shade part of the beach. You know, coral bleaching is also associated with global warming. So as temperatures rise, the polyps will be expelled from the structures and leave them white like this. You've probably heard about the issues in the Great Barrier Reef and how big portions of it are bleaching. A reef can survive one bleaching event or a couple of bleaching events, but if it's happening over and over again, because the ocean temperatures are too high, it can kill the reefs. And it's already taken out, you know, pretty significant portion of the Great Barrier Reef and other reefs around the world. If you're interested in learning more about this issue, there is a incredibly informative and frankly devastating a documentary. You can watch it on Netflix called Chasing Coral. And it really goes into depth of this issue and how it's affecting things. And coral reefs are primary habitats for sea turtles. Another way that global warming can affect sea turtles is, you know, rising sea levels. And so we're seeing more and more erosion on a lot of nesting beaches. So the more that the beach gets eroded from, you know, higher and higher waves, it can expose the turtle nest like you can see in this picture. So I mentioned earlier that hawksbill turtles are critically endangered because of their shell. If you remember that pretty shell, it's this tortoiseshell pattern. You've heard of tortoiseshell, I'm sure. You may have a pair of glasses that are this pattern. You may have a tortoiseshell cat. This pattern has become known, you know, brown and gold and yellow as tortoiseshell, but it actually comes from the shell of the hawksbill sea turtle. And this stuff was plastic before plastic was invented. It's been used for thousands of years to make trinkets, combs, glasses, things like that. Chances are, if you have a pair of glasses, it's plastic. But in a lot of places where the hawksbills live, and even places where they don't, like Japan, where they still have a legal domestic hawksbill industry, you travel around the world, you see these in markets. They're sold frequently to tourists who don't know that it's coming from a critically endangered animal. So it's still a pretty big problem around the world. Just a few weeks ago, my organization released a report that detailed 10 countries where it's happening on a big scale and another 30 countries where the trade is still happening on a smaller scale, even though the international trade has been outlawed for about 30 years. So this is preventing the recovery of hawksbill turtles from around the world. So yeah, I'll talk more about that later. So that's the depressing part of the presentation. I'm moving on to the more positive part of the presentation. So I mentioned earlier that this slide here has some hidden good news. So the two ones that are lit up there, the leatherback and the loggerhead, they're both considered vulnerable. But as recently as 10 years ago, the leatherback was listed as critically endangered and the loggerhead was listed as endangered. So now both of them are vulnerable because of increases on nesting beaches, new nesting beaches that were previously unknown. And so they're in a lot better shape than they were you know, up until a few years ago, which is really great news. And it even goes beyond that. You know, we're seeing some really positive signs in turtle areas around the world. So this slide here shows each of those circles. You see CC, that's careta, which is the loggerhead turtle. The LO is the olive ridley. So each of those circles is a different population of a different species of sea turtle. The green ones are increasing. And you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of them out of 17 are growing, and 5 of them are dropping. So, you know, people have been studying and protecting them for, you know, like I said, 60 years. And the great news is we're starting to see some results around the world where beaches are coming back. In fact, there's one here, the green turtle, the Chelonium metis in the Pacific. There's a beach in Mexico that we work with. I'll just give you a quick example. They used to have tens of thousands of nests of these black turtles in the up to the 50s and 60s when they started getting exploited on a large scale, being shipped around the world. Their numbers dropped successively through the 1980s when the local community, the indigenous Nawa community, and a local university, University of Michoacan, started working together to study and protect these turtles. By 1999, they had dropped to only 500 nests from 80,000 or so to 500 nests, and they were concerned that this population was heading towards extinction. But something happened in the year 2000. The number started going up a little bit, started going up to 1,000, 2,000, and then as the years passed, 5,000, 10, 15, 20,000. As those initial hatchlings that they started protecting in the early 80s started returning, this number started going up. And this past year, they had 45,000 nests and 2 million hatchlings. So 500 nests to 45,000 nests in 20 years has to be one of the most successful sea turtle programs, if not all wildlife programs in the world. So there are examples, maybe not quite that dramatic, but examples of numbers of turtles nesting around the world going up because people have been working to protect them. So how do we do that? Well, different conservationists and groups and universities and things will work on different things. One is working on that fishing problem, the bycatch problem. So one solution is what's called a turtle excluder device. And so what this is there's a grate that goes across the mouth of a shrimp net. So there's little pink things there, shrimp. And the shrimp pass through the grate. The turtle hits this metal grate and it gets forced out a hole in the bottom. And the fisherman gets his shrimp. The turtle gets to survive. The people who like shrimp get to eat their shrimp. The shrimp probably don't like it, but everyone else benefits. And so there are people working on adapting fishing gear like this to help protect sea turtles and keep them out of nets, and it's helped save the lives of lots of turtles. It's law now in the United States that to use those on boats. Another way that we're studying sea turtles, I talked about the lost years and all the mysteries that we have. Well, there's one way that we're doing to solve that mystery is putting satellite transmitters on the backs of sea turtles. And what these little transmitters do, you can see this one glued to the shell of this hawksbill, sends a signal to a satellite up in space, and then we can follow it online where it goes. Because if we don't know where a turtle is after it leaves the beach, then we can't really protect it very well, right? So this technology is getting cheaper and smaller and more effective. There are actually groups that are now starting to put tiny little ones on the hatchlings to learn where they're going. They only last a few months at most. So the hope is that technology keeps improving, but this is really helping open up the world of sea turtles and how we can learn about them. One of the biggest things that we learned in the past 60 years of working on turtle nesting beaches is that when we protect those beaches and keep anyone that wants to eat the eggs away and get those hatchlings into the water, the numbers can start going up, like the beach in Mexico that I mentioned. Like I said, there are examples of this happening around the world. This is a great photo to give you an idea of just how large the leatherback is. I think this is probably, my guess is probably a smaller one. But these guys are checking the tag on the back of the flipper there as it heads back out to the water. So yeah, like I said, 6 to 8 weeks later, these hatchlings can arrive, and our work is to get them back into the water as much as possible. We have a program, my organization, Sea Turtles, that works to help support locally based groups on turtle nesting beaches, around Latin America and now around the world. This is actually kind of from a couple of years ago. Well, now we support more than 25 organizations in Asia, soon to be Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean and the Middle East now too. Actually, we just supported a new project in Oman. We are also supporting a great project there in Sri Lanka. If you too, Sean. Yeah, so when people donate or companies donate, we can save as many as 10 hatchlings for every $1 that's donated. And then we get it to these beaches so that they can help get as many hatchlings out into the water. This is actually a photo from that beach, Colola, in Mexico, that has had the incredible resurgence. I was there with a couple of tour groups last December, and we were getting between 200 and 500 turtles nesting per night and several thousand hatchlings per night as well. And, that one is a really great program because they do a great job, really integrating the local community. What they do is they pay these awesome, hilarious kids to go out to the beach and collect the nests and bring them to the hatchery for safekeeping. And so this is a way that these kids can earn an income in a pretty remote part of Mexico where there's very few jobs. And so the program helps benefit the community, helps benefit the turtles, and it's one that we're really proud to be working with. Another great example is the hawksbill that lives along the Pacific coast of the Americas. Again, as many as 10 years ago, people thought that these turtles were basically gone. But because of beaches found in Nicaragua and in El Salvador, we now know that there's more than 1,000 females out there. And we've been supporting local groups to help protect all of the eggs past 8 or 9 years. And so to kind of wrap up towards the end here, and then I'll be happy to take some questions. What can you do, wherever you are around the world, to help protect sea turtles? Well, one, as I mentioned, yay, Sea Turtle Week. Head to seaturtleweek.com. You can follow at Sea Turtle Week on Instagram and Twitter, and we're going to be posting about all the different species every day, and just learning about them, learning about the threats to them. So if you're on social media, hop on and follow us on these things, and retweet and share information about these animals. Another way you can help sea turtles is by not buying products made out of their shells. So we have a guide. You see the website here. Our program is called Too Rare to Wear. So tooraretowear.org has guides on how to recognize them, has the reports that I mentioned. You can see the ones on the right are made from actual tortoiseshell, and the ones on the left are either plastic or look fairly similar. So we have ways that you can learn to know. But what we really say is if you're at a souvenir shop when you're traveling, or maybe in the place where you live, and you see something that looks like this and you don't know, maybe avoid purchasing it just to not get confused. So cleaning up plastic, using reusable things like reusable water bottles, reusable bags when you go shopping. I know a lot of places during the pandemic are not allowing that right now, but hopefully we'll get back to normal with that and be able to stop. There is international coastal cleanup, coastalcleanup.org. That's every September. That's in most countries around the world. So if you're outside of the U.S., you can look up a local cleanup on that website. Here in Oregon, where I live, we do microplastic cleanups with a group called Sea Turtles Forever, and beach cleanups are a group called Solve Oregon. But if we reduce the amount of plastic that we use in general, less of it's going to get into the ocean at all. And you can also use your voice. We encourage people to, if you go to a store or get a product that has tons of plastic, let them know. Say, hey, we'd love it if you use less plastic, and it can help. An activist campaign helped convince Trader Joe's to reduce their plastic usage by 1 million pounds a year recently because their customers spoke up. And so that was a great thing. You can go see them. So like I said, we're Sea Turtles. We have trips where you can go and work hands-on. Apologize for the background noise. It's street sweeping day that's passing now. You can go see them. You can go work with these incredible animals. And like I said, it helps benefit the community. It's this great experience. You get to do hands-on stuff, helping to collect the eggs, helping to measure the turtles, helping to release the hatchlings, and the money goes to turtle conservation and these communities where they live. If you're a teacher in the U.S., you can join our annual school fundraising contest. We'll have to see if we'll do one this fall, just because of the situation. But every year we've had one for the past 7 years. We've helped raise about $40,000 for sea turtle conservation, and the classes who win get great prize packs with chocolate and snacks and bracelets and other fun stuff. So you can find out about that on our website. We also have symbolic hatchling adoptions, which are available in the U.S. The shipping, unfortunately, international is not available, but you can help save hatchlings by doing a symbolic adoption. And that's it. So I am going to bring myself back here, but our website is seaturtles.org. You can find us on all the social media. So give us a follow, get in touch, and yeah. Stop my sharing here and bring myself back. So hope you learned something. Hope that was enjoyable. And now I'm ready for all your great questions.
That was amazing, Brad. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your experience with us. It was very interesting to listen to. We have people in the stream outside with questions, but I also wanted to give people here in the group an opportunity to ask questions. Is there anyone that is in the group here in the Jitsi room that has a question that they want to ask before we go out to the live stream? Any particular questions that you have for Brad? I don't see hands raised, but there's an option of raising your hand. Manjula, did you have a question?
Yeah. I saw a question on our YouTube streaming. So Kathy asking about what children can do to protect sea turtles. So if you can go to seaturtle.org, so there are so many things you can do to protect sea turtles. There are school programs, sea lesson plans, turtle field trips, and turtle pond races. So there are so many sources that you can get the knowledge about the sea turtle. So I think that you should subscribe to the newsletter as well.
That's great suggestion.
Yeah, and I can jump in here real quick too. We do have a page on our website, seeturtles.org/kids, and it has resources for kids. We've had many kids will like sell lemonade or sell reusable straws or do fundraisers on Facebook, which they can do. And like I said, 10 hatchlings are saved for every $1. We've seen great examples of kids pushing their schools to go plastic free and to stop giving out straws or plastic utensils. Your families can go out and do beach cleanups. Every time you go out into nature, you can do. I wouldn't recommend it right now while we're in the middle of a pandemic. You want to be picking up trash, but once things hopefully return to normal sometime soon, you can do those kinds of things. So there's a lot of things that you can do, but yeah, going and seeing them, I think, great experience. Having kids, I love having kids on our trips where, and then on trips, you can go see them in a lot of places, but when you really see them in the wild, they're really chaotic and fascinating species. I think, kids fall in love with them when they see them.
That's great. Yeah. We had Nicoletta from the group outside said, how long do turtles usually live for?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't get to that in my presentation. That's an area where there is still some, an idea, but we're just starting to figure out the ways to age a sea turtle. Once they're full grown, you can't tell how big they are from their length of their shell or anything like that. So our best guess is maybe 80 to 100 years. And it kind of depends on the species. But there's an organization, or actually a government agency, NOAA, out in Hawaii that is looking at isotopes from nuclear tests back in the 50s, and you can use that to age a sea turtle shell by taking a sample, which is pretty fascinating. So we're just really starting to learn that, but like I said, maybe 80 to 100 or so years.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's nice. Nice long life. Medea had a question: how do turtles hide from their predators? She's logging in from Pakistan.
Excellent. Great question. So some turtles, like hawksbill turtle, I talked about its beautiful shell. Well, it's that color so that they can blend a little bit to coral reefs. The very intricate color reef allows them to hide, so they can kind of wedge themselves under coral, things like that. Another thing is that generally sea turtles, the top of their shell will be darker, and their plaster on the underside of the shell will be lighter. So if a turtle's at the surface, it can blend in more, seeing it from below, and then seeing it from above, darker will blend more into the bottom, and light will blend in more to the top. But generally, their biggest protection is that thick shell.
Interesting.
Yeah, Amar has a question, I think. Amar, you can ask the question.
Oh, he's in, good.
Yes, hello. May I ask?
Yes,
I see it in the chat here.
Thanks a lot. Yes, what are the favorite places for the turtles? Because for the deep in the sea, and what are the favorite foods that she live on it?
Sure. So, the different sea turtles kind of live in different places. Some of them for entire lifetime. So they don't do a lot of migrating, and they're kind of, they stay kind of, in an isolated area. And they will eat sponges. So they're called spongivores. So sea sponges are very common around coral reefs, and they're actually really important because they can eat up to 1,000 pounds. So, 300-400 kilos a year of these sponges. And that's actually really important for coral reefs because those sponges compete with coral for space. So we call the hawksbills the engineers of the reef because they can help kind of manage how many sponges are there. Where the leatherbacks, like I mentioned, they will migrate to cold waters looking for jellyfish. The green sea turtles will generally stay closer to shore because that's where the seagrasses that they like are. Loggerheads, they have these big strong jaws, and they like crustaceans, so things that charge out of shells like lobsters and crabs and urchins. So they will hang out in areas where they can find those kinds of animals.
Interesting. Gina had a question. I know she's from the UAE. So do you want to go ahead and ask Gina?
Hi, Brad. Thank you for having us. We do a bit of conservation ourselves. That's my son Gareth, and I'm here. I teach about sea turtles and also do beach cleanups in the UAE. So whenever you are out here, we would love to have you over. And Gareth had a question for you.
Do you all protect sea turtles, rescue them, the ones that have barnacles on the shells?
So the barnacles. So the issue with the barnacles being on the shells is that there are, some barnacles that adapted specifically to live on the shells of sea turtles. So it's not necessarily a problem that barnacles are on the shell of a sea turtle. It can affect their drag, so make them less hydrodynamic, like slows them down swimming through the water. The more that you have on your shell, the slower you're going to go. But one thing that happens is when a turtle is not very healthy, sometimes their immune system is compromised, and lots of barnacles will end up on the shell, and that can weigh the turtle down and prevent it from swimming. So if there's a place where a turtle is found that has a lot of these barnacles, and there's an aquarium or a hospital where they can be taken and helped to recover and then released, they will take the barnacles off. But if we just see like 1 or 2 barnacles on a turtle shell, we'll just let it go because that's a natural thing. But that's a tremendous question. I don't think I've ever been asked that.
Yeah, that's great.
The reason we asked was because out here we have a turtle conservation place where at Burj Al Arab, and normally there is an alert whenever we see turtles with barnacles that are beached upon the shores, we can actually take them out there, where they actually remove the barnacles, because they have marine biologists out there who help with this mission. So they, or if their carapace is hurt, or carapace is hurt, or even their flippers or anything. So we take them to the place, and then they take care of them. They have a period where they keep them in various pools, and before they are sent back into the ocean. So we see them pretty often out here.
You also could feed them.
Yeah, and we get to feed them. What was your other question?
Yeah. Can you recognize the turtle's age by just looking at their shells?
Only when they're little. So between hatching to when they're fully grown, you can kind of tell how old they are before they're fully grown. Once they are fully grown, there's no way to tell how old a sea turtle is by looking at it. They don't have rings in their shells like like trees.
Interesting.
That's interesting. And with regards to education, if you're interested in being a marine biologist, because Garrett's pretty interested, how difficult is it,
Okay.
and how easy it is, if you could guide him?
There's lots of places to work with sea turtles. There's lots of universities that have great programs. I actually didn't study biology myself, but that's probably the easiest way to go. Like I mentioned, I went and volunteered on a beach and got that experience, hands-on, and then eventually started this organization, about 12 years ago or so. There's lots of skills that are needed, and not just biology, but also, fundraising and education. So see who does that well. Sounds like you're already getting some great experience at this rehabilitation facility. So it sounds like you're, on a great path. So good luck, and I hope to work with you in a few years. Once you're graduated from college and work with these animals.
Yes, we look forward to, and you're most welcome to get in touch with us when you're in Dubai.
That's great.
Okay,
Thank
excellent.
you.
Thank you.
Dunson Bolaji asked, how can the turtle catch be reduced in low-resource countries?
That is a great question, because, you do find in a lot of places where fishing is a really, really important economic activity, and the fishermen may not be able to afford things like I mentioned, like the turtle excluder device or other types of gear. And so there are different organizations working on this. This is an issue that I've worked on directly, but I have a good friend who is studying and working on a technology that will put solar-powered lights on fishing nets. And so he's getting some money to purchase the lights and to give them out so that the fishermen don't have to pay for them. And that light can discourage a turtle from coming into the net. The turtle can see the net, whereas it doesn't discourage the fish. So, I really think it's dependent on around the world if we want to solve this issue, because so many fishermen, that don't have a lot of resources or just not able to afford that and to be able to feed their family as well. So I think it needs to be done on a much bigger scale, and I'm hoping that will happen. But it is a very challenging problem.
I see. Steve Leo asked, I think it's for his child, do turtles live in specific areas, or do they live all over the world?
Both. They live in specific areas all over the world, and some, like I mentioned, will migrate. So, some turtles, like I said, the leatherback will nest in Malaysia and then swim to California and then up to Alaska and then back to Malaysia. There are loggerheads that nest in Japan that cross all the way over the Pacific, grow and feed in Mexico, and then swim all the way back to nest. It kind of depends. They're found all over the world, and some of them are constantly moving, and some of them kind of stay in their spot.
And Ludmila, do you want to ask your question?
Okay, yes, thank you. I see a lot of films about turtles, and I'm always amazed with all those small creatures, small turtles, and I wonder if their shell is soft.
It got kind of jumbled. I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Just is the shell of small turtles soft, or just appear from the eggs?
Oh, yes. Yes, a little bit. So it kind of depends. So 6 of the 7 species have hard shells. It is a little softer when they're born and kind of hardens as they grow a little bit. But the leatherback, so the name leatherback indicates that they do not have a hard shell. So you shouldn't do this if you're there with the leatherback. If you take your fingernail and you can kind of like put like a little mark in it with your fingernail, that's soft. It's not like soft, but it is not like a hard like rock, almost like. But the leatherbacks always are like that, and the hatchling's a little bit softer, not quite as soft as the leatherback. A little bit softer when they're born, and then they harden as they grow.
Nice.
That's a really interesting question too. I don't think I've been asked that.
Taruna, thank you.
Yeah.
Taruna, do you want to ask your question?
Taruna, can you turn on your microphone?
Brad, it was a lovely session. And my question is that how deep can the turtle dive?
Oh, that's a very good question. So the record holder for the deepest diving for the leatherback, they will dive up to 1 kilometer deep.
Okay.
Pretty big jellyfish as they're migrating. So that's deeper than all but a couple of species of whale. And so they're the only turtle that can get that deep because of what I was just talking about, the softer shell. So a hard shell turtle, if they try to go that deep, the pressure from being that deep would crack the shell. But the leatherbacks, because they have that shell, can withstand that pressure without the shell cracking. And so that's why they can dive deep. And the other thing about them diving is it's also a way for them to get away from sharks, because sharks cannot go straight down, but a leatherback can. So if a leatherback is swimming along and a shark comes to get it, they would just dive. And the shark will try to get them. And I've actually seen on the beach leatherback turtles where you see the back of it, where you can see a bite mark taken out of the back flipper because the shark just bit it as it dove, but it survived. Be 50 meters, 100 meters, things like that, but it's the leatherback that go real deep.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Loretta, do you want to ask your question?
Do lights affect turtles when they hatch from their eggs? Because I learned that it's bad to disrupt a turtle's hatching session.
Yeah, light on the beaches from like hotels or street lights or things like that can affect turtles in 2 ways. One is it can deter the adult female. If adult female comes up on shore and there's a lot of light, it can decide to return and not nest. And then the hatchlings, when they're born, so when they're born, they have this instinct of a few different cues that they use to get from the nest down to the water. And that's things like the slope of the beach, it's the sound of the waves, and if you're on a completely dark beach, the brightest point will be over the water, because as the waves, either the moon or the waves, as they crash, are a little bit lighter than everything else. So the turtles will use that light as a signal for that to be the direction that they go. So we see in a lot of places where there is a lot of lighting on the beach that the turtles can be attracted inland, and obviously they can't survive inland. So there's a lot of places, Florida, one example, is doing a lot to try to reduce that by putting lights, on the street level itself, or stuff like that. But yeah, in beaches where there are, a lot of lights and people and stuff, that can happen where they get drawn inland as opposed to the water.
Interesting. Thank you. Loretta, do you want to ask your question? Loretta?
What is the name of the turtle that has a soft shell?
I'm sorry. So I think there was some. We can come back to you. I think, but I think there was someone else that wanted to ask that hasn't had a chance yet.
Loretta, do you have a question?
How long can a turtle hold its breath?
We're gonna come back to you in just a second. We're gonna go to someone who hasn't asked the question yet, and then I'll come back. I promise.
Okay. Loretta had the question. Are awareness campaigns a real help to protect these wonderful animals?
Absolutely, if they're done well. I've seen a lot of places where people just start putting out stuff and they don't necessarily know their audience very well. They don't do a lot of research. But yeah, awareness campaigns have been very effective in a lot of places. Either reducing, I've seen examples where it reduces the number of people eating the eggs. There's a group that we work with in Nicaragua, Fauna and Flora International, is launching a campaign to try to convince people to stop eating the eggs and using the shell. Trash and litter campaigns have been really effective in a lot of places. So I really don't think you can do sea turtle conservation without a good outreach campaign, and I think it's something that our community is getting better at, and learning how to do it well, and working with teachers and studying, what messages will be effective for people. So yeah, I think they're critical to saving sea turtles. They've been very effective.
Wow. And Godwin, did you have a question or just a comment there? Godwin's logging in from Tanzania. And I just wondered if he had. He just said, "Go ahead."
A question.
Yes.
My question is, although partly was asked by Steve, are these wonderful creatures all over the water bodies? Because I heard it is California, Mexico, and I was really wondering, do we have them in Indian Ocean and the other lakes we have around the East Africa?
Yes, absolutely. There are. In fact, I know of an organization based there in Tanzania called Sea Sense that works with sea turtles. So yeah, most of our work is concentrated in this part of the world, in the Western Hemisphere. But yeah, there's sea turtles are all over the world. There's lots of them in the Indian Ocean. They nest in a number of countries in Africa. I don't think there's a lot of nesting in Tanzania, but they do live in the waters. But Mozambique, South Africa, Madagascar all have nesting beaches, and then on the western part of Africa as well. And then a lot of the islands in the Indian Ocean, the Seychelles, and places like that have quite a few nesting. So yeah, there's actually an organization called the Indian Ocean Sea Turtle something, IOSEA, that is a network of people from all around the Indian Ocean working on sea turtles. So yeah, absolutely, there are some around you. And if you want to get in touch, my email, brad@seaturtles.org, or you can get it through Elaine. I'll be happy to send you some information, what's happening there.
Thank you very much.
That's great.
Sure.
Maheen Arbab, possibly from Pakistan. How long can turtles stay underwater?
Well, that's a really good question. Maybe the most boring research study I've ever heard of was a captive turtle, a green turtle, where they were counting how long it would sometimes in its tank stay underwater. And the longest that they calculated was 4 hours. So what turtles can do is, when they're hanging out underwater, is slow their heart rate down, and they can make oxygen that they have in their blood last a really long time. So, they can stay for hours underwater if they want to. Generally, they won't. They'll come up for air, they're 30, 40 minutes. Kind of depends again upon the species and what they're doing. But yeah, they can hold their breath for a really, really long time.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see if we have any more from this group here. I know we have so many countries represented. Sister is from Pakistan down here, and I don't know everyone who's in here, but we've got quite an international group of people that are really enjoying what you have to share. From a fast swimmer, I have the question, how fast do they swim?
How fast do they swim? I don't remember off the top of my head, like the actual speed, compared to other ocean animals, and I can look that up, I should know that. But compared to other ocean animals, they're generally slower. Dolphins, fish, the sleek, non-shelled ones are all pretty faster, but definitely a lot faster than a human. They have these huge shoulder muscles that they use to power themselves along, and in short bursts they can quite fast, but not for a sustained length of time.
Okay. Kathy lives in Tokyo, and she wanted to be sure that she understood, what can young learners do to protect the ocean, and in particular sea turtles, if you're a young learner? I know you have some programs that younger students can be involved with.
Yeah, sure. So, there's a number of ways. Like, one is, I mentioned the, cleaning up plastic or making sure that it doesn't end up in the water. Reading about them, going to see them. Like Gareth, I think is his name, going, and there are some places where you can volunteer and walk up and down the beaches and help, study the turtles. Generally, you have to do that, with in some way, in the rehabilitation centers. There are volunteer opportunities. You can talk to your schools and your classmates and your teachers and the other people that you know about these animals, and tell them what you learn and things like that as well. And then, and I know not every student in every place has the ability to raise funds, but some in places where are able to do that. So there's a few different things that kids can do to help protect sea turtles.
And Gina, did you want your son to ask his question again?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that.
How can you tell the gender of a turtle?
How can you tell the gender, the sex of a sea turtle? So when they're full grown, you can tell by the length of their tail. The males will have really big, long tails, and the females will have ones called cloacas. And so when they're full grown, it's really easy to tell the difference. Big tail is a male, little tail is a female. But when they're hatchlings or growing up, you can't tell by just looking at them. There are ways that you can look inside their cloaca, their little tail, if they have male or female parts, genitalia.
Thank you.
Lorraine.
So if anybody has any additional questions, Brad, they can get in contact with you. Your website, your website again is?
Yes. The website is seeturtles.org, not SEA Turtles. That's a different organization. A great one. Check them out too. But we're seeturtles.org. And then my email, when you email me with questions, is brad@seeturtles.org. I'm happy to answer any other questions as well.
Okay. Amar, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes.
Did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
Yes, I'd like to say it's possible to suggest that can we do the group with made of students and teachers to learn more about the turtles and create awareness about how to conserve them, as well as activities from different countries to exchange the experiences, if it's possible or not, and thank you.
I'm sorry. It was a little bit muffled. If it's possible to do what? I'm sorry. Can you repeat
He
that?
texted it on the bottom left side where the text is in the chat.
Okay. Okay. We do a group meetup of students and teachers to learn more about turtles and create awareness how to conserve them, as well as activities from different countries to exchange experiences. Yeah, that's something that we're open to. On our website, we have lesson plans that teachers can use. We have videos, and then I also do these presentations, like Lorraine mentioned at the beginning, online for classes directly. So you can get in touch and we can try to organize that as well.
That's great. Well,
yeah. Maybe one more question.
Anybody else? Sister, did you have a question in Pakistan? Sister? I'm not getting the audio, but I seems like you're talking.
I think he has muted.
Maybe you can text it and we'll get the information that way. Anyone else?
Yeah, I see there's one more question here in the chat by Amr.
Okay.
I hope
Go ahead.
I'm not pronouncing that, but I apologize. Does plastic affect turtles in a big way? What is the extent of this effect? We're really just starting to learn how big it is. But yeah, and again, it kind of depends on where, but there are places. There's a program in Uruguay, in South America, where they are finding almost all of their sea turtles that they find have plastic inside their body. So it affects all sea turtles. It can affect by filling up stomachs and not allowing them to eat. It can tangle them and not allow them to swim. So yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's one that's growing. There are finally starting to figure out some solutions, and I think I don't know if anyone's seen the video of the straw coming out of the turtle's nose. That was filmed by a good friend of mine named Christine Figener. And that has really helped spark, a worldwide effort to try to reduce the amount of plastic, plastic straws and plastic bags. And there's lots of organizations working on reducing the amount of plastic. And so I think we're starting to make progress on that. Lots of countries are banning plastic bags and things like that. But, there really isn't a great way, once the plastic is out in the ocean, that I've seen some efforts like ocean cleanup that, I think, have some potential, but are not quite effective quite yet. So anyway, yeah, there's a big problem, and it's one that's really only growing, and I think will only stop when we stop putting plastic into the water. One question. So, all right, I see one more question. Do turtles have a weapon to defend themselves? No. I mean, they can bite, but it's not really something that they use often to defend themselves. Usually only researchers that are carrying them, they try to bite. Really, the only thing that they have to defend themselves besides their camouflage and the quick burst of speed is their thick shell. So, yeah. So, yeah, I think we should maybe wrap it up with that. I know I apologize. There are other questions there, but feel free to email me. I have to get going here, but
okay. Can we take a minute
to
take a picture?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Yeah, I remember, Brad, when you came to when you Skyped into my class, the kids did not stop asking you questions because it's so interesting. It's fascinating to listen to. So it's once you get started, there's so many questions that people have about sea turtles. They're interested. So,
yeah.
Manjula,
yes.
Under the chat box.
Yeah, on behalf of the teachers and students who are in the meeting and watching live stream, I can see so many people watching the live stream as well. So I want to thank you, Brad, for another amazing session. And this is truly been, exciting and fascinating way to celebrate World Ocean Day. Thank you very much, Brad, for taking your valuable time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we do a photo?
I put my
Yeah, wait. Yes, I took several photos. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Do you want people to turn their cams on?
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
if you just turn your cam on, if you're still
Yes.
there, that would be
Can
great.
everyone, yes, turn
it on?
the camera, yeah. Yes, Mira, can you turn on the camera, please? And Rachel and Lyudmila from Poland.
So we have stepped around.
Okay, got it.
You got it?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very, very, very much for, Brad, thanks so much for sharing with us.
My pleasure.
That's great. Thank you.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody, and hope to hear from you. And have a great World Ocean Day.
Thank you.
Turtle Week.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Manjula, I'm going to stop the streaming.
Yes, stop the streaming and I will.
I stop it on Jitsi, right?
Yeah, then go to YouTube and stop the streaming there as well.
First I'm stopping it on Jitsi. Stop live stream.
Wait.